The prairie was quiet that evening, too quiet for Emma's restless heart. She stood at the edge of the worn wooden porch, her small carpet-bag clutched tight in her hand. The ranch stretched out in endless golden waves of grass, the wind whispering across it as though urging her to leave before anyone noticed. She had arrived at this place weeks ago, battered by life's storms, a widow with no family to call her own. The rancher who had given her shelter, Luke Carson, was a man of few words, strong as the land he worked, and just as lonely. Emma knew his kindness wasn't meant to keep her forever. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she found her footing. But in those weeks, something had taken root. Not just the fragile safety she felt under Luke's roof, but the bond with his little daughter, Clara. The child had eyes like soft brown velvet, always watching, always hoping. She had lost her mother years ago, and Emma had seen in her the same ache she carried inside. Still, Emma believed leaving was the right choice. Luke deserved someone stronger, someone unburdened by scars and shadows. And Clara, well, Clara shouldn't grow attached to a woman who might vanish like all the others who had drifted in and out of her life. The sky had begun to deepen, streaks of violet and rose fading into dusk. Emma took a step off the porch, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path. Her bag felt heavier than it should, though all it held was a change of clothes and a Bible worn thin by her fingers. She drew in a shaky breath and whispered to herself, "Just keep walking, Emma. They'll be better off without you." But then, a small hand slipped into hers. Warm, trembling, unyielding. Emma froze, her heart lurching. She looked down and found Clara standing there in her nightdress, her bare feet dusty, her curls mussed from sleep. The child's eyes brimmed with tears that glistened in the fading light. "Please," Clara whispered, her voice so small it nearly broke the evening silence. "Please don't leave us alone again." Emma's throat tightened. The words struck deeper than any wound. Clara wasn't just asking her to stay. She was begging for a family, for love, for someone who wouldn't disappear into the night like shadows on the prairie. "Clara," Emma knelt, setting her bag aside. Her hands trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from the little girl's face. "Sweetheart, I didn't mean to." "You promised you'd read me the story tonight," Clara said, her voice wobbling, "and you said you'd braid my hair in the morning like Mama used to. If you go, who's gonna do that?" Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She had never promised to be this child's mother, but somehow, piece by piece, she had stepped into that space. And Clara, in her innocent way, had already claimed her heart. Behind them, the screen door creaked. Emma turned and saw Luke standing in the doorway, his tall frame shadowed against the glow of the lantern inside. His eyes, usually hard and guarded, were fixed on her with something unreadable, something that held her in place as surely as Clara's hand. "You were leaving," Luke said quietly. It wasn't an accusation, more a truth laid bare. Emma couldn't answer. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Luke's gaze softened as it fell on his daughter clinging desperately to Emma's hand. He stepped down from the porch, slow and steady, as though afraid a sudden move might break the fragile moment. "Clara," he said gently, "go on inside, darlin'. It's getting cold." "No," Clara cried, holding tighter to Emma. "If she leaves, she won't come back. And then it'll just be us again." Luke's jaw tightened, and for a long moment, silence stretched between them all. The wind rustled the grass, a coyote howled somewhere far off, but here in this small circle of hurt and hope, time seemed to stop. Emma's chest ached with the weight of it. She wanted to run, wanted to stay, wanted to believe she could be what this little girl needed. But her heart had been broken too many times, and she didn't know if she had the strength to risk it again. Still, when Clara's tears slipped down her cheeks, Emma couldn't bring herself to move away. She pulled the child close, pressing her lips to the crown of her hair, and whispered, "I'm here, Clara. I'm right here." Luke exhaled slowly, almost like he'd been holding his breath for years. His gaze met Emma's over the child's head, and in that look was something Emma hadn't expected, something steady, protective, and quietly pleading. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt the faint stirrings of belonging. But belonging came with danger. And Emma knew the hardest choices were still ahead. The morning sun broke over the Carson ranch, spilling gold across the wide fields and setting the barns aglow. Emma stood at the kitchen stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, the faint scent of cinnamon filling the room. Clara sat at the table, swinging her small legs, already chattering about the day ahead. It should have felt ordinary. It should have felt temporary. But to Emma, it felt dangerously like home. Luke stepped in from the porch, his boots heavy against the floorboards. He had already been out working before dawn, as always. He set his hat on the peg and washed his hands at the basin. Clara hopped up from her chair to hug him, and he gave her a smile that reached his tired eyes. Emma caught herself watching. Luke wasn't the kind of man who smiled easily, but when he looked at Clara, or at her, it changed something in his face. A softness. A warmth she hadn't seen before. She quickly turned back to the stove, her heart racing. "You didn't leave." Luke's voice was quiet, almost tentative. Emma stiffened. "No," she murmured. "Clara asked me to stay the night." He studied her for a moment. "It meant more than you realize." Emma didn't answer. Words seemed dangerous now, like stepping into places she wasn't sure she was allowed to go. After breakfast, Emma braided Clara's hair, just as she had promised. The little girl sat still on the porch step, her curls falling through Emma's fingers. Clara's smile was radiant, and Emma's heart ached with both joy and fear. "You look like a princess," Emma said softly. "Do princesses get mamas who stay?" Clara asked suddenly, tilting her head back to look at her. The question cut deep. Emma's hands faltered, but she steadied herself and kissed the child's temple. "Princesses get people who love them," she whispered. "Always." Behind them, Luke leaned against the post, his arms crossed, watching in silence. He had heard the question too, and Emma saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. That evening, Luke found Emma sitting by the corral fence, staring out at the grazing horses. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and crimson, the air cooling with the coming night. "You're good with her," he said, walking up beside her. Emma smiled faintly, though her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "She makes it easy. She's full of hope, even after all she's lost." Luke was quiet for a long time before he spoke again. "So are you." Emma turned to him, startled. "I'm not full of hope, Luke. I've been running from one place to the next, trying not to need anything, anyone." "Hope?" She shook her head. "Hope only leads to heartbreak." His jaw tightened. "Maybe. But maybe it also leads you to the one place you're meant to be." Her chest tightened, and she had to look away. "I can't stay. I'm not the kind of woman who fits. You and Clara, you deserve someone strong, someone certain." Luke stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Clara doesn't need someone perfect. She needs someone who won't walk away in the night. And I—" He stopped, as though the words were hard to force out. "I need someone who makes this place feel alive again. Since you came here, Emma, it hasn't been just a house. It's been a home." Tears stung her eyes. No one had ever said something like that to her before. "Luke," she whispered. He reached for her hand, rough and calloused from years of work, but warm and certain. She didn't pull away. The silence between them was filled with everything they hadn't said, everything they feared, and everything they wanted. Then, soft footsteps approached. Clara came running, clutching her rag doll, her face lit with joy. "Papa! Miss Emma! Look at the stars coming out!" Emma looked up, and indeed, the first glimmers of silver dotted the velvet sky. Clara wedged herself between them, taking both their hands as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Emma glanced at Luke, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt chosen. Clara squeezed their hands tight. "Now we're not alone anymore," she whispered. Emma's tears slipped free, but she smiled. For once, she wasn't thinking of leaving. For once, she thought maybe, just maybe, she had found the place God intended for her to stay. And as the stars spread wide across the heavens, Emma knew one truth she could no longer deny. She wasn't slipping away anymore. She was home.